you play against people that big, that makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
If it was something like Colbert County or Grayson
Mark,
State,
I was
that's
gonna
different.
ask you,
yeah.
would you mind if I recorded it as well? I know
No,
you're
it's-
doing
that's-
now,
yeah,
but
so
I
you're
can
like,
listen to it in
man,
the car.
That's fine, yeah,
I'm
no
about
problem.
to slant on it, you know.
Okay, so first thing I want to do here is talk a little bit with you guys about what the format of the exam is going to look like, right? There are going to be 3 parts. The first part is going to be a short essay. What I'm going to do is give you a poem that you've not seen before, at least not in the context of this class. Maybe some, you know, it might be something you've encountered elsewhere. How do I know, right? And what you are going to do is perform a reading of that poem using one of the theoretical lenses that we've talked about. Now, you don't necessarily, some of the theorists that we've talked about belong to more or less the same school, right? So you don't have to use just a single theorist, right? But make sure that the theory that you're using belongs to a kind of single branch, right? So if you're doing, say, a new critical reading, you know, you can use Clamp Brooks and you can use Wimsatt and Beardsley for that, right? This should be about 3 Blue Book pages long. And I will provide Blue Books for you. And by Blue Book, by pages, you know that I mean like sides of a page, right? I don't mean, you know, 3 pages front and back. Part 2, you're going to play Name That Theorist. So what I'm going to give you is a series of paraphrases of several theorists' main ideas. And based on those paraphrases, you are going to have to name the theorist, and the school of theory to which he or she belongs. Right, so this is where those kinds of like fine differences between theorists are going to come into play, right? So to give you an example, if I was to say something like, a poem is an organic unity that cannot be paraphrased because to alter the relationships between words would destroy its meaning. Which theorist would this be a paraphrase of? If we're talking about things like organic unity and unparaphrasability. Pardon?
I said yes.
Yes.
It's my, like,
This is a paraphrase of a theorist, yes. You can remember having read this and talked about it in class, right?
Cannot think of the name of it now whatsoever. It's under new criticism.
Yeah, okay, this is a new critical idea, right? So you've got the school right. Yes, this is new criticism. But we looked at a couple of different new critics, right?
It would either be Richard or Empson, or am I looking at the wrong thing?
We didn't read Richards or Empson directly though, right? We talked about them as influences on new criticism, but we didn't look at them directly.
This is the heresy of paraphrase, right?
Yeah, this is the heresy of
And
paraphrase
that's the one
guy.
I did. That's the bad one.
It's actually not the one you did.
Wasn't it?
No.
Who is this one? It's new criticism.
It's new criticism.
Is it Levi Strauss?
Levi Strauss is a structuralist.
Yeah.
That was, Levi Strauss binary opposition.
Yeah, Levi
Yeah.
Strauss is a binary oppositions guy, right?
Would it be one of the fugitive or agrarian?
Yep, it's one of the fugitive agrarians. Yep, the only one that we actually read.
Was it Brooks?
Yep, this is Clarence Brooks.
Can I get bonus points for that?
No, because you had to use your notes.
That's fair. That is fair.
Okay. Now, if I was to give you something like the author's intention should not be the final word on what a text means, who am I paraphrasing here? Can we isolate this to a particular school at least?
Formalism. Or is it Russian?
This is actually not, specifically formalism, it's related to formalism.
It's kind of is that more of the broad thing that you kind of go subgenres that we studied after that, or?
Yeah, I mean, most of the theorists that we're talking about don't really give a shit what the author thinks, right?
Yeah.
But this is also a new critical idea. Think in terms of fallacies.
Intentional fallacy.
This is the intentional fallacy, right?
Reeling it in.
Oh, that's what that thought. Is that Henry Bunk? Or am I thinking of something else?
I think you must be thinking of something else. Yeah, the intentional fallacy, it's two names. It's two guys.
Is that the beat?
You're on the right track.
Wormwood and Beasley.
Wormswood, not Wormwood and Beasley. You wouldn't get credit for that, but Wimsatt and Beardsley.
Yes. Okay. I don't know what it's called, and I can't necessarily remember the exact name. I remember what it sounds like. Like
Yeah.
Saucier and the Saucier.
Saussure.
Yes.
Yeah, Saussure keeps popping up, right? So the reason that I chose these two in particular, right, is because to demonstrate, right, that some of these will come from the same school of criticism, but different authors writing within the same school have different notions of what's most important, right? They're coming at it from slightly different angles. So you will have to be able to differentiate between different theorists as well, even within the same school. So we might do a little bit of work on this, if people want to, after I talk about what exactly is going to be on the test, right? So the third part, part 3, is going to be identification. So I'm going to give you $12 terms to choose from. You will choose 8 of them. And you will give me a definition and a school of theory to which this term is for which this term is useful, right? So, can you come up with, through your notes, the sorts of things I might ask you about, the sorts of terms I might ask you to identify?
Synchronic, diachronic.
Okay, yeah, I might ask you about the difference between synchronic and diachronic, yeah? That could be a thing.
What intentional fallacy be one?
That could be a thing as well.
Who makes the mimetic?
You like the mimetic, expressive, objective, rhetorical. No, we won't be going back to that. Yeah. Pardon?
Meta.
Okay, yeah, I might ask you what a metonym is, right? Because that's important for Lacan. I might ask you, like, say, what the symbolic order is, or the law of the father.
This question.
Yeah.
So the opposite is it just mother or is it law of the mother?
There is no, it's desire for the mother.
Desire for the mother.
Yeah. Yeah. And Lacan makes it less explicitly sexual than Freud does.
What Saussure, would it be like, is that the language word?
Long and parole, right? Yeah. I might ask you about what the difference is between long and parole, right? And what is the difference between long and parole?
One is a single utterance, the other is the whole scope of the language, the boundaries of whatever the language is.
Yes. Which is which?
I think it's law.
Long is the overall view, and parole is the singular.
Exactly, yes. Long is the entire system of the language. And parole is the single utterances through which we learn that system, through which we catch glimpses of that system. All right, good. Other things that we might see as terms, do you think? We mentioned the heresy of paraphrase, right? That might show up.
Intertextuality.
Intertextuality could pop up.
There was one, the blissful orgasm, if you would.
Okay, does anybody remember what he's talking about? With what word? It's a French word, right?
Yes, it's one of the French words.
That was here recently.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think I tore it out my. I carried that one.
This is actually another one of those two-word pairs, right?
Yes.
From Roland Barthes' deconstructionist phase. Right? Plaisir is mere pleasure, right? That you get from passively reading. And jouissance is the bliss that you get from actively participating in the creation of a text meaning, right?
All right, I have, are you gonna do uncanny?
That's one that could pop up, sure.
And what about for the manifest content, latent content?
Manifest and latent content, yeah. I mean, you can't really understand Freudian criticism without knowing those terms, right? So,
Yeah, that changed my life right
yeah.
there. Because it's helping me when I read stuff for other classes.
Mm-hmm.
How, because before, I just found a Jeremy thinking, I tried to figure out maybe what does this mean, but now I
Yeah.
have lenses to put on, like, okay.
Sure.
look at it this way. The way to look at it
Well,
is this what it means.
Mhm.
What about the sign and signifier and signify?
Sign, signifier, signified, yes. And you may have picked up on here, what I'm basically forcing you to do here is go through your notes and look at stuff we've talked about, right, that we've put a little star by or that might be important. Right, I might ask you about heteroglossia, right? I might ask you about différance. Does anybody remember what différance is? Différance was one of the particularly difficult ones, right?
Okay, it's the difference or the combination between to differ and to defer?
Yes.
Or is it the combination or the difference between those?
It's essentially what it is. It's Derrida created what's called a portmanteau word by smushing together the French word for to differ and to defer, right? Because they look different on paper, but they're homophones. They're pronounced the same way. So on one hand, what he's saying is that language is a differential system, right? Where you identify words based on their difference from other words. But that words also always refer to objects that are absent, right? So expressing something in language is always an expression of a lack or an absence, right?
So that's the act, presence versus act.
Presence versus absence, yep. Yep.
Something would be evil, it has to lack good, or be absent good.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, that would be what a structuralist would think, right? But that's the idea that Derrida is trying to take apart, right? We tend to see evil as a lack of good, right? Rather than evil as a quantity in its own right. What he's trying to do is look at those kinds of binary oppositions and show that, no, actually, this other thing, this other part of the pair, is a thing in and of itself, right? Is itself a positive quantity if we simply look at the binary a different way. That these ideas of presence and absence, or having and lack, are largely the result of cultural preferences. All right. Anything else we've looked at that you guys think might pop up on the
Myth
exam?
and meta-language?
Okay, yeah. What's a meta-language?
The second level signification.
Yeah, so this is referring back to Roland Barthes in his structuralist phase, right? Right, the whole idea that myth is a signifying system that's built on top of another signifying system, right? Where things that are fully constituted signs in one system become mere signifiers in another system, right? Attached to a different signified. All right. So this is a pretty good set of the sorts of things that might appear in the ID section on the exam, right? This isn't an exhaustive list. There are other things that might pop up. So keep going through your notes. Make sure you can define things. If you have questions as you're studying about what something is or what it means, then shoot me an email and ask me, right? I'm happy to respond to help with that. But it looks like you guys actually have a pretty good sense of what sorts of things you need to know, at least for this portion of the exam, right? And yeah, just keep going through your notes, putting a star next to anything that looks like it might be an ID term, and it's probably not a bad idea, if you haven't done so already, to make flashcards of these. Right? put one word, put the word on one side, the school of theory, the definition on the other, and just keep testing yourself. Okay, now the part of this that I found students had the most trouble with the last time I taught this course was this name that theorist portion. So why don't we work a little bit on that to make sure that everybody is well prepared in order to do that and understands the kinds of distinctions between theorists that I'm going to be asking you to make. So we've got paraphrases here for Brooks and for Wimsatt and Beardsley, right? So let's work on a couple of others here. So I'm going to give you a couple to identify, and then I want you to try to construct a couple that we'll evaluate. All right, so let's start. With something like this, right? A literary work is similar to a dream. The writer sublimates a socially unacceptable desire into a set of symbols and incidents. Who am I paraphrasing here? Who does this sound like?
I was somebody pretty early on in what?
Not that
This is
early.
psychoanalytical.
Yeah, this is psychoanalysis.
Analysis.
This is straight up Freud.
Okay. I didn't know if you said anything about
Okay, I see.
literary
Yeah.
work. So that's why I was a little
If
vague
it's,
on that one.
correct me if I'm wrong, if it's something more, and this, I made a stupid statement. If it's more dealing with language, it's going to be somebody pretty early on.
Yeah, if it's something dealing with, most of the critics that we were looking at up until Freud were dealing with language or linguistics in some way, right? Russian formalism, structuralism, deconstruction, dialogics, those are all born pretty much directly out of linguistics as a field, right? New criticism isn't directly related to linguistics, but is concerned with language. New criticism is growing sort of more directly out of like late 19th, early 20th century aestheticist theories of art.
Could you, if you don't mind, could you throw out, you ain't got to define it, but throw out the terms that will be associated under psychoanalysis, just so we kind of have those two?
Sure, yeah, well, we've already looked at a couple. We've looked, manifest and latent content, right? The uncanny is here somewhere. Condensation, sublimation,
Omnipotence of thought.
omnipotence of thought, yep. I think I mentioned manifest and latent content already, right?
Yes, sir.
Yes. So those would all be associated with Freudian psychoanalysis, right? But yeah, so if you're seeing words like dream, sublimates, right? Those should be hints to you that this is Freud.
Desire.
Desire actually could pop up in Lacan as well, right?
I mean, that's how I'm thinking of psycho.
Yeah. Psychoanalysis in general has to do with desires, typically. The expression of unfulfilled wishes, right? So if we were to take a slightly different tack with this, right? All human activity is an expression of our desire to return to a state in which we are not distinct from others, but are merely part of a larger organism. Who might this be?
Lacan.
Yeah, this is also psychoanalysis, and this would be closer to Lacan, right? And you might also want to look to identify Lacan, right? I might not express it exactly this way, right? I might talk about the mirror stage. I might mention, sort of the law of the father, or, how our induction into language teaches us our place in the world, right? That would actually be another thing that might pop up in terms, right? Mirror stage. So keep that in mind. All right, so now that we've got the basic idea here, sort of what we're looking at, what I'd like each of you to do is pick a theorist. Don't tell me or anyone else right now who it is. And I want you to try to write a paraphrase of one of that theorist's main ideas, right? Anybody you choose. But not Freud or Lacan or Winsett Beardsley or Clarence Brooks, because we've already done those. Take your time. I don't have to be anywhere for another hour. yeah, go ahead.
An author cannot be 100% original because
Okay.
because all authors use or pull from another author's work or voice.
Okay, so who can guess then who or what James is paraphrasing? What theoretical approach does this sound like?
I hope I did it right.
I don't know.
I think it might be mine, but I'm not sure. I don't want to say it because if it's not mine.
Go, go ahead. He'll tell us.
I don't want to say it because never mind. I think I'm wrong. I'm wrong.
I was going for Bakhtin.
Dang it.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Because I was
Yeah.
doing the same one over here. Right?
Yeah, this is one way of expressing Bakhtin's idea of dialogics, right?
Or darn.
That a text is just kind of a weaving together of a variety of voices, right? At different socioeconomic levels, often from different textual traditions or textual sources, right? Okay, so whenever somebody else has one, go ahead and shoot.
We tend to favor speech because the signifier and signified seem to be fused in presence of a speaker.
Okay, can you run that by me one more time?
We tend to favor speech because the signifier and signified seem to be fused in presence of speaker.
And I am just going to add a little bit, I'm going to add a but to this if you don't mind.
No,
And
I
if
actually
and if I'm
have 5 things on it, but yes, go
And
ahead.
if I'm,
I just wasn't
if I'm
sure.
referring to the wrong thing, then you let me know then. So we tend to favor speech because the signifier and signified seem to be fused in the presence of the speaker.
Mhm.
But even in speech, all words simply defer the presence of the actual object. Would that be?
And that would be deconstruction and Derrida.
Absolutely. Yes. Good. All right. Whenever anybody else has one, shoot.
This class, all communication and miscommunication. Did we do that again? Was that correct?
All communication is miscommunication.
I think we did that here because I remember seeing that this right
And
now.
that might have been weird. That is weird.
I'm sorry, what'd you say, Jeremy?
That is deconstruction.
Okay, this is Derrida deconstruction. And yeah, it would probably help you as you're studying, to try to paraphrase different theorists in different ways, right? And try on different ideas, right? Not only will putting it in your own words help you better understand the idea, but it will also help kind of reinforce it for identifying things on the exam, right? All right.
Is there any particular vocabulary words, I guess, for Derrida that we would need that kind of
Okay, well, Derrida's vocabulary is basically structuralist, right? So he uses terms like sign, signifier, signified. Difference is a word to look for. If you look, in fact, if something, if there's a paraphrase that says, differ or defer or both, then you're talking about Derrida, right? If we're talking about presence and absence, then we're probably talking about Derrida. If we're talking about, the actual primacy of writing over speech, then we're talking about Derrida. Because remember, one of the things Derrida says about this idea of différance, right? That because this word sounds exactly like the French word for difference, if he just speaks it, you don't know exactly what he means, right? But if you see it in writing with the little accent mark over the A, then you know what he means. So you can express things in writing that you can't express with speech. And if you're looking at anything that mentions binary oppositions, then you're looking at somebody that, you're looking at a theorist who is either a structuralist or a post-structuralist, right? The idea comes from structuralism, but deconstructionists like Derrida use it as well. Because essentially what they're doing is trying to take apart structuralist assumptions. Okay, so I guess, do you guys have any particular questions about any particular branch of theory or about any particular terms or anything you want clarification on?
I'm trying to think. Because really, us going over Derrida a couple of times, really, that helps. That's the hardest one that we came in contact with.
Derrida is probably the most confusing of everyone that we read. Yeah.
Okay, original Saussure, right?
Okay, Saussure.
Original, right?
Okay. Yes. What do you want to know about Saussure?
Could you give us one of those statements?
Okay, sure. So, right, at any given time, or any given moment in history, a language is a system of signs defined by their difference from one another. That can only be understood through examining specific utterances. Right? This is that Lange versus Parole idea, right? Which is at the center of most of what Saussure is doing. Right? Saussure's argument is in part that there's no natural relationship between the two parts of the sign, right? There's no natural relationship between signifier and signified. Basically, we just need each signifier to be different from other signifiers, right? So we need bat to be different from hat or cat or mat or rat. And you only understand this system of differences through examining individual utterances, right? People who are competent in the system have simply internalized it through speaking and reading, and are never really aware, like, it's all at a kind of like subconscious level, right? We never really see the full system. You can't map out the full system. You only catch glimpses of it through specific utterances. So we can see how Derrida is adapting this system, right? And sort of, pushing back on it a bit. So that would be Saussure's main idea. Another thing that we might focus on with Saussure is the synchronic versus diachronic thing, right? Does anybody remember what the difference is between a synchronic study of one study and a diachronic study?
I think synchronic is seeing how all are similar together as opposed to diachronic, how it's changed over time, right?
Yeah, a diachronic study of a language or of anything, right, is a study of historical evolution, which is how linguistics was largely done before Saussure, right? Linguists went sort of looked at, the way words and grammar changed over time. Saussure argued instead that we should be doing synchronic studies of the language. You look at the language at a particular moment in time as a coherent system. And to really understand how language works, you have to try to figure out this, how the system works at a given moment. It doesn't have to be your current moment, but it has to be, you have to be looking at the language at a specific moment.
Like we talked about idiocracy, how the language just, at that point in the future, had become just jumbled.
Sure. I mean, in a way, like, it's what they're speaking in idiocracy is English, right? But so like a diachronic linguist would focus on how we got from contemporary English to that future English of idiocracy, right? If there are any linguists left in the world of idiocracy, right? A synchronic study, however, would only be interested in how that language functions at that particular time, right? All right, what other questions do you guys have about anything at all that is relevant to this class?
Certain personal issues that I'm trying to.
I'm afraid I probably can't be much help with those.
We'll take, a synchronic approach.
Yes, take a synchronic approach to your personal problems.
I'm trying to think of what I had the hardest time understanding. And we've gone over here a couple times, so I think that was pulling through.
So Barthes, he goes along with Saussure in his belief or understanding of it, but he just adds on with the myth and doing the meta-language.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Barthes' study of myth is based on Saussure, right? Essentially, he couldn't do what he's doing without Saussure as that layer underneath it. And the same goes for Levi-Strauss, right? Actually, really the same goes for Derrida, right? None of them can do what they're doing without Saussure underneath them. That was why I had you read that long and very dry essay on linguistics, right? Just so that you got the vocabulary, you got the basic ideas before we started to read things that were more directly related to literary theory. But yeah, essentially, yeah, what Barthes is doing, at least in mythologies, is laying another signifying system on top of
one that
language.
already
Yeah,
exists,
yeah.
I had two questions. First off, so Saussure was this general linguistics.
Yeah, he's the course in general linguistics is Saussure.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then if you had just a little bit more time, I have a general idea of Barthes and Levi-Strauss, but the whole statements helped me out a lot. Would you mind doing two quick ones for them?
Okay, sure. So if we look at Levi-Strauss, right? Levi-Strauss and Barthes, like what they have in common is that they're both looking at myth as though it functions like a language, right? So what Levi-Strauss is arguing that it's a language made up of mythemes rather than words, right? So kind of narrative units. So to try to sum up or paraphrase Levi-Strauss, right? In order to understand the cultural concerns expressed in a myth we must collate all extant versions of that myth and examine the binary relationships between these mythes, these narrative units, right? So he gives that example of, for those Zuni creation myths, right? That sort of place hunting as an activity sort of somewhere between warfare and farming, right? They resolve that binary between, creating life and creating death by putting something in between it that kind of does both, right? Now for Barth, we would say something like this. So right, let's just note that this is right, Levi-Strauss structuralism. Right. Myth is a signifying system built on top of another signifying system. Fully constituted signs in the first system are reduced to the status of signifiers in a myth. So that would be Barth's version of structural study of myth. Now remember too that another key difference between these two guys, right, is that Levi-Strauss is looking specifically at myth as narrative, right? Levi-Strauss is arguing that narratives essentially are a language system, and that we can figure out that whole underlying language system of narrative through these kind of individual utterances that are embedded within stories, right? For Barth, all cultural expressions, right, are a form of language. And so what you need to do is pick apart these kinds of commonly accepted codes that people with, competency in a particular culture understand, right? Does that make sense? Everybody got this? Okay, is there anything else you guys want to talk about?
Related to this class.
Yeah, related to this class.
I think I'm good.
And I actually said to class yesterday about the resolving the myth. Is there actually anything that's resolved, or because I just looked at my notes and it said body oppositions resolve themselves within the myth. Is there
Yeah.
anything resolved?
Usually a myth does sort of end with some sort of compromised position, right? Whether in the case of certain Greek myths, the troublesome individual, like if any of you are familiar with Greek tragedy, right? Greek tragedy usually ends with the troublesome individual being pushed out of the polis, right? And everything resolves into harmony again. That Zuni myth where a sort of compromised position is found between life and death, between, you know, warfare and farming, hunting. That would be a resolution of a binary. So Levi-Strauss thinks that binaries get resolved in myth. Right. Derrida thinks that binaries are false oppositions anyway. All right. Any other questions? Are we feeling a little bit better about this?
A lot better.
Okay, all right, good. Yeah, well, so I'll let you guys go then. If you don't have, oh, you got one more? Okay.
Can I explain to you this Laconic thing in Wuthering Heights? I'm trying to paint.
Go ahead, go for it. All
Have you
right.
read Wuthering Heights before?
Yes, I'm familiar with
So
Wuthering
you know
Heights.
the Catherine Heathcliff.
Yep.
Okay, so my argument is that what they really desire, make sure I find the notes, is connection with the mother. However, there's a difference between Catherine and Heathcliff. Because Heathcliff got the law of the father first before he ever got connection with the mother because he was an orphan.
Sure.
And Catherine's mother died.
And he operates under a different set of status rules. as a result,
Exactly.
right? Yeah.
He has
Okay.
to, his desire ends up becoming, he wants that connection with Catherine, but that has to be proven through, not political legitimacy, but financial legitimacy, because she marries Edgar because he's rich. And even though she loves Heathcliff, and Heathcliff's not rich, so he has to go out and get rich, which I haven't gotten that point yet. But gets money and comes back.
Yep.
And they're both, and not only that, they're doppelgangers of each other. They mirror each other because
Okay.
they're both usurpers.
Uh-huh.
Heathcliff usurps what's his name, her brother, and Catherine usurps Isabella. She takes when she marries Edgar and sends her off to go live at Wuthering Heights. But they're both they both are trying to regress back to that point of back to the mother. But however, Catherine reaches it first when she gets sick, when she gets all hysterical and stuff and dies because they have to take care of her, as opposed to Heathcliff, who's fiercely independent. He has to go away and become a different person, essentially, because he operates in the law of the father.
Okay.
You know, because he's the essential, but he's
The
the
no.
orphan's bride. You know,
Okay.
he doesn't have anything. There is no nurturing. The
Right.
you know, the societal norm teach him who he is. Like,
Right.
you're orphan, you don't belong here. So he has to find.
And the status, an orphan is a status that is defined by lack, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, an orphan lacks parents. Yeah, I think I would be willing to buy much of that.
Okay, I'm working on
From a Lacanian perspective, yeah.
slowly reeling
Yeah,
it in.
yeah, keep at it. I think that has potential.
I'm kidding.